Hi folks, you're with Tassie, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to do a review of a movie that was a bit of a landmark in its time, called In the Heat of the Night. And I think it was brought out around 1967, 66, 67, around there. And it starred the black actor, which are very few back in the day, Sidney Poitier, Rod Steiger, Lee Grant, Warren Oates, and others. So it's gushed over then and now. What it is basically, it started off, I think, as possibly an idea for quite a good movie, but then a bunch of Jewish activists got hold of it and decided to turn it into some anti-white, gentile, hard-hitting, social commentary, and that, I think, devalues it substantially. So the general thrust of it is there's a cop from Philadelphia who's black, and he is exquisitely well dressed, tailored suits, very well spoken, clearly urbane, erudite, way smarter than any white person for a Philadelphia homicide detective, by the way. And he is going to the south of the United States to visit his relatives. I think it was his mother. And he's taking the train back to Philadelphia. And during his stopover, while he's waiting for another train, he's just arbitrarily arrested for no reason by a super racist in caricature white police officer played by Warren Oates, and dragged off. So turns out, they're investigating a murder there. He's arrested as suspect, but the police there are so fucking dumb. Just a bunch of dumbass hick white folks here who've got this genius black guy in the sharp suit, well spoken, who happens also to be an expert coroner, by the way, as well as being a homicide detective. So wow, I mean, when you got that much talent in town, you got to use it. So the Sidney Poitier, the black police officer's chief in Philadelphia, tells him he's got to stay there for another few days and help the local police solve this murder. Now, apart from all the improbabilities of this aside, every white person that he deals with is, beyond super racist. They're just off the planet, high on steroids racist. And assuming those people, of course, do exist, but it's just overdone. They're presented by the Jewish activists, directors and producers and scriptwriters and so on as being just white trash, lower than, not even human. They're just the lowest form of white trash. And when contrasted with the super urbane black police officer, then that contrast turns them into double white trash on steroids. And by the way, Nazis as well. By inference, by the way, that's not said. So, you have to suspend disbelief to watch a movie like this. Now, I first saw it when I saw it on TV when I was, 15 or 16. And at the time, I sort of saw it as pretty serious social commentary, but even then I kind of saw the holes in it, but sort of put that to one side and took on the social commentary, as a lot of 15, 16-year-olds do. I remember not many of my peers thought much of the movie, so I was sort of a little bit alone as seeing the social commentary side of it. But anyway, I saw it again. I don't know, probably early 30s, I guess, somewhere around there. And the holes in it were starting to my experience in life was broadening, and the holes in it were becoming quite apparent. And how could so many off the planet, racists be there? And then I watched it again, probably, I don't know, early to mid 40s, I suppose, somewhere around there. Now, by that time, I had a lot more experience, and I'd worked with and hired and interacted with a lot of black people at that point. So the presentation of Sidney Poitier in 1966 or 67, whatever it was, no less, as being this super urbane, well-spoken, dressed in very sharp tailored suits and all that sort of thing. This idea that such a black guy would have existed and would be a homicide detective in Philadelphia was beyond absurd. I'd never met any black who was that urbane and sophisticated, and certainly not as well dressed. And the black people that I had met at that point and hired, by the way, I'd hired a number of black people at that stage, were nothing like this guy and the Sidney Poitier character. And I had a lot of trouble with black people that I hired. That they would real struggle getting them to turn up for work on time and not leave work early. And equally a big struggle getting them to do their job, or when they turned up, assuming they even turned up on time, they'd be, they were dressed, they weren't dressed ready for work, and they would insist they had to go off and, oh, but I've come from the gym or this or that, and they were constantly running out of money. And the behaviour between sort of one to the other was really quite minimal. So they a lot of them seemed to behave on or about the same way. None of them spoke anything like Sidney Poitier spoke. In fact, I've never come across a single, in terms of personally interacting on Thomas Sowell and those sort of people were, and there's a few were very well spoken, but really you'd be, out of the time I've been on Earth, if I've even heard a dozen black people speaking as well as Sidney Poitier does, and they certainly wouldn't be homicide detectives. But anyway, that's the general thrust. But I need to give the background of the times. Now, there were again, it was mainly a Jewish gig. Norman Jewison, Walter Mirisch, and others associated with it. Now, we need to, and Lee Grant, by the way, the lead female role in the show was. The name's a little bit deceptive. Her name's actually Rosenthal, and she changed the name to Grant. Now, all of these people were Marxist activists in their way, and so you've got an overrepresentation of Jewish Marxist activists, and in the periphery and around, many whom are homosexual and lesbian and so on. So they're the classic sort of Jewish Marxist academic homosexual working in the entertainment industry. These were the people that the Soviet Union, the agents from communist Russia would target to turn them into double agents or propagandists to undermine the West. So at the time, you've probably all heard of something called McCarthyism, where Senator Joseph McCarthy was chair of the, I think it was called the House Committee on Un-American Activities, and they were looking for communist activists that had penetrated the public service, but also things like Hollywood and the entertainment industry. And there's no shortage of people to go after, and the profile typically was, a Jewish gay or lesbian and of Marxist views. So the people that they targeted were, and they targeted Gentiles as well. It didn't matter, but were disproportionately Jewish because the Jews were most heavily overrepresented amongst those activists. So they were banned or blacklisted from making movies or working in the movie industry or acting or anything like that. Now, Lee Grant, Rosenthal, was one of these, as was other people associated with that project. So they'd all suffered under what they saw was anti-Jewish, gentile oppression of their views and so on. But they sort of seemed to think their activism was okay and acceptable because the Gentiles were so bad, and they were still sort of running off the propaganda of the Nazis. So we're an oppressed people. Look what the Nazis did. Therefore, you got to cut us special breaks. And the House of Un-American Activities didn't really fall for that one at the time. And, no, you're an activist, and a number of the people brought up on trial were Jewish, and again, with Marxist associations and views and attitudes. Now, Lee Grant, again, Rosenthal made a speech, back in the day, and which was quite a young woman. I think she'd have been maybe 25 or something, suggesting that people who died Jewish people who died as a result of being accused of communist activism, that they had been in effect de facto killed by this House of Un-American Activities, and a bit of a stretch. I see the point, by the way, but would they concede that people, Gentiles, commit suicide today when they're harassed over, putting an anti-transgender comment online or something? Would that same view be taken today, or was it only a one-way view there? So Lee Grant made that speech and found that she was blacklisted on the Hollywood scene. And she didn't get another movie role for, must have been 10 years, maybe longer, 10, 12 years, something like that. So all of the Jews involved with in the heat of the night, it's primarily a Jewish production, all of them had real problems, and they were angry and bitter and resentful towards the white Gentile population. Now, it was a little bit hard of them to say, well, you're oppressing Jews, you did it, because that really wouldn't have washed. They wouldn't have got much sympathy. But they could get much more mileage by saying you're racist against black people, which means you're racist generally, which means you're completely racist, which means you're completely bad, you're completely evil. Therefore, any victim group, and they would see themselves as one, any victim group is therefore suffering at your hands. So the black racism thing was like a way to open the door, and like a wedge or a sledgehammer to hit the Gentiles with. Anyway, the fact that they were activists and wanted to use the movie as an activist platform doesn't mean it wasn't a good movie, or that they weren't capable of their job. The script writers could write good scripts. Norman Jewison could make good movies, and Lee Grant could act well, and so there was no shortage of talent there. That they chose to use that talent for activism is a separate discussion, but it didn't mean they were untalented or the movie was rubbish. Now, the movie was, I think, quite good. I mean, there were, again, it fell over in a number of ways. The idea of an urbane, superbly well-spoken black homicide detective. Oh, what a fucking joke. The idea that he's got a very crisp, very cultured North Country accent, yet he comes from the deep south of the United States. That's nonsense. That wouldn't have happened. And that's something I picked up as a kid. Well, how come he talks that way if he comes from down there? So that doesn't make any sense. The idea that the hick white policeman, damn racist policeman would come in and wouldn't even question the guy, guy who's again well-spoken, wearing a sharp suit, and that the guy would allow himself to be arrested without showing his policeman's, this is the Philadelphia, policeman's ID, is quite absurd. Of course, he would show, say, hey, excuse me, buddy, I'm a cop. Look, here's my ID. And that he didn't do that. He just allows himself to be arrested without a word. And only when he's questioned by the police chief, played by Rod Steiger, does he decide only at that point is he going to produce his ID. The sole purpose being, of course, to create this idea of these stupid, dumb, hick, racist, fucking white boys, Gentiles. None of the bad people are Jewish, by the way, or in the movie. So then and only then does he produce his ID. And of course, that's ridiculous. The idea that as a homicide detective, that he's also an expert coroner is, again, utterly absurd. But there you go. And that he knows how to use all the tools of the coroner in terms of determining, cause of death, time of death of this corpse they've got. That again absurd. the fact that all of the police, none of the police officers can work out even the simplest things, such as whether someone could drive two cars or not. Only he can work that. All the others, they're way too stupid to do it. Only he, the black guy, is smart enough to suss all that out and to work it out. And without him, they'd be lost. They were nothing, just damn white fucking trash. That's all they were. And of course, racists are everywhere. They're trying to kill him and beat him up and do all sorts of things just because he's black and for no other reason. Now, they've got a situation where these bunch of goons are chasing the Sidney Poitier character and trying to beat him up or possibly murder him, I don't know. And now these are people that know and know intimately that he's working directly for the police chief. And they know that if they, in any way interfere with, like beat him up or kill him or something, the black guy, then they know that the police chief is going to be asking some very serious questions. And the police are depicted as having incredible arbitrary powers. The law doesn't exist. It's all arbitrary. Not like the northeast of the United States where the good people live. These are damn fucking Nazi hicks, and they're in the deep south. Which is an attitude people in the northeast still have today, by the way. You hear when they mention Texas. I used to do a lot of traveling in the US on business. Even the word Texas would invoke sniggers among the people from the northeast, New York, Boston, and so on. Damn hicks. And this was in, I think, the state of Mississippi. This might have been set this heat of the night. So there were just endless amounts of the desire to show and depict evil white people overcame the desire to make a great movie. And this movie was on the verge of being great. It could have been a really great movie. But it's not, and they let it down because they couldn't keep their fucking hands off the activism, and that's what lets it down. I invite people to go and have a look at the movie. It's actually not bad, so you'll be reasonably entertained. But again, you have to suspend the disbelief and the symbolism. The bad white guys are chasing Sidney Poitier, and they go through a rubbish tip, and there's a white doll on the rubbish tip that the camera zeroes in at. Damn white trash with a bang, sophisticated, fucking genius black guy. That's fucking white trash. Things like that I thought detracted from the movie, and I think they're almost cringeworthy to look, because they're just trying too hard to turn it into an anti-white movie. There's a couple of the super racist cops. The Warren Oates character and the Rod Steiger character. Rod Steiger did play a really convincing job of the redneck Southern white sheriff, or police chief rather. And Warren Oates again is the sort of the stupid dumbass, pathetic hick. But they're both won in the movie. They're both won over. And they're not racists anymore now because they met the only black person in 1967 in the entire world who was that sharp and that urbane and wore so many sharp suits and that sort of thing. So have a look at the movie, but see if you perceive it as I do, as a movie that had huge, that is in its fundamental sort of state quite good. But because they allowed the activism to take over. But I've given you the backstory there as to the simmering anger that the Jews had at that stage because of the disproportionate number of Jews. There were also Marxist activists, communist activists that were targeted by the House for Un-American Activities, which was chasing down communists. And this was their, one of their ways. And they're still paying us back today, even now. And this was one of the ways that they were paying back evil bad whitey. But I'd like to see your views and please put your opinions below. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.